Hello and welcome back to Crypto Saving Experts, where we talk about the latest cryptocurrency news and take a look at the markets so that we all know exactly what is happening. My name is Jess and we do these live streams every single weekday. So if you are new here, please don't forget to tune in every single day where we talk about what's going on in the markets and keeping you up to date. Let's see what's going on in the chat here. Rob says, good afternoon, everyone from a cold UK. It's absolutely freezing in the UK right now. I keep seeing videos of people on holiday and it's making me sad and cold. So wishing I was back in Australia, to say the least here, but hopefully things will start to warm up in the next couple of weeks. Summer's just around the corner, I hope. Let's see what's going on with the prices of the assets in the markets this morning. Crypto's looking just as cold, with Bitcoin down slightly, almost 0.5%. Ethereum down almost 1% to $2,513. Let's take a look at what's going on in the charts here. Not much movement in those top coins there. It's all looking a little bit red for the majority of these tokens. In terms of gainers, we're looking at Tron up slightly, Tron up slightly, but really nothing much here. So let's take a look at what's been going on in the markets. Let's pull up the Bitcoin chart first of all. So let's pull that up, see what's going on here. Good morning, everybody in the live chat there. I still don't get this Holly joke. I'm sorry. I think I've missed it. Let's take a look at what's going on here. So if we go to the 4-hour chart, you can see we have a major level of support that runs all the way across here. Now, we've used this level of support a number of times now. We've spoken about it on the channel a couple of times now as well. I'm looking at that $41,937 level. There are some other crucial levels of support that I want to discuss. In fact, let's once again pull up that Bitcoin liquidation heat map from CoinGlass. Let's pull this into the mix here. So let's see if it is this one. Do you know, I've noticed so much that I say in the middle of my sentences, so I'm trying to stop that. What we can see here is we've got some liquidation leverage levels at $41,822. So that's a major level there that we should be keeping an eye on, because we all know Bitcoin takes the path of most pain. So if there's a huge amount of liquidations here, meaning that there's a load of people in long positions and that's their liquidation price point, we could see the price of Bitcoin wick down and liquidate those traders. Now, it's really important to keep an eye on factors like this. I've been looking at this chart very closely within the last couple of weeks. If we take a look at this is at $41,822. So if we pull this across here, that is $41,822. So we're looking at around that level of support that we have just discussed. If we go into the bigger time frames here, we can take a look at what's been happening on the weekly chart. You can see that we have some more major levels here. We have some down at 41,800 and we have some up as well at 43,676. So if we go to 43,700 and put that on the chart as well, there are two kind of liquidation levels around us right now, which could be attracting Bitcoin. Bitcoin could hit them both though and liquidate us all. And what we're saying here is Bitcoin's really retesting some levels of support right now. It did get heavily rejected from that $49,000 level after the ETFs were accepted by the SEC. So now we are waiting to see if we can pick up any more bullish momentum or if we are going to see a little bit of a pullback. Now, if I'm looking logically at the markets, we can see we've had a really nice move to the upside within the last couple of months, thanks to the momentum and the expectation of the SEC approving these ETFs. Now, the ETFs have been approved, and we've seen them launch into the markets. We've seen a huge amount of volume in those products and it's been brilliant to see, and I still do think it is a game changer for cryptocurrency in the long term. But in the short term, all of that bullish momentum's kind of died down. And we've had a really nice rally here. So is it possible that we could see a pullback right now? Potentially, yes. Now, I'm not saying this is definitely going to happen. We've seen these ETF issuers purchasing a huge amount of Bitcoin within the last week. We saw BlackRock purchase 11,500 Bitcoin in just one day. So we are seeing some fluctuations there, but there is some possibilities that we could be seeing a little bit of a pullback. So let's take a look at some levels of support and then we'll take a look at some levels of resistance as well. So if we take a look here, there are some major, in fact, we're going to do the zones again. So let's pull up these rectangle tools here. We can see there is a major zone of support here. This has been used numerous times in terms of the last kind of 2 months. What we've seen is this has been wicked numerous times. This is between the 40,800 $4,800 level and the $40,200 level. So that's the zone that I am keeping an eye on in the short term if we do break through this slanted level of support at around $41,900. Now let's take a look at some levels of support and see what's going on there. So there's definitely some strong levels some levels of resistance we want to be looking at. There's definitely some strong levels of resistance within this range here. We have seen us be testing this range numerous times now. So you can see twice back in December and even more times later in December, and then a couple of times earlier this year as well. And we even did retest this as a level of support. So this is a really crucial zone. And this is at between $44,000 and $44,260. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on those two levels there. Let's take a look at what's going on in the chat quickly. Randy says, don't forget to hit the like button. Please don't forget, if you are watching today's stream and you are enjoying it, to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button so you don't miss the latest cryptocurrency news. We do these live streams every single weekday. We have done since Bitcoin was down at $16,000 and it is now trading above $42,000. So if you want information on what's happening in the markets and you want to understand what's going on every single day, make sure to tune in here, educate yourself about crypto, and prepare yourself for what's coming in 2024, because in my expectations, it's looking like it could be a huge year for cryptocurrency. Good evening, Jason, all the way from Australia, sunny Australia, while we're sat in the UK in the snow. What a change there. Let's take a look at what's been going on in the cryptocurrency news today, and then we'll take a look at Ethereum at the end of today's stream, compare it to the price of Bitcoin, and see what's going on with the altcoins right now, because we've seen a nice couple of days where we've seen some nice movements to the upside. But let's discuss if that's going to continue. We are seeing a little bit of sideways action today. So let's discuss all this. First of all, let's take a look at what's going on in the news. So I want to talk about the SEC. The SEC are the regulators in the US who regulate securities. Now, we used to speak about this a long time ago on the channel, where we were discussing the problems that arise when it comes to regulation of cryptocurrency in the US. When we're looking at cryptocurrency regulation in the US, we're looking at which regulator should be regulating these digital assets. Now, the SEC regulates securities, the CFTC regulate commodities. In 1946, I believe, in the 1940s, there was a test created called the Howey test, and this determines whether an asset is a security or a commodity, and therefore whether it should be regulated by the SEC or by the CFTC. Now, this Howey test was created obviously before digital assets were created, and since digital assets have been created, they've kind of created a flaw in the Howey test, and the Howey test no longer clearly classifies whether assets are securities or are commodities. Now, the Howey test is a list of 4 conditions, and if all 4 of these conditions are met, it means the asset is a security. If just one of those conditions is not met, it means the asset is a commodity. So that's how you determine what classification an asset has. Now, the problem that's arisen with cryptocurrency is that these conditions are no longer clear, and they no longer clearly classify whether an asset is a security or a commodity or not. And there has been some conversation and some kind of subjective element to determine whether digital assets are securities and whether they should be regulated by the SEC. Now, the SEC and the chairman, Gary Gensler, have been charging many different cryptocurrency related companies within the last year or so because they believe a lot of the digital assets in the market are securities. Now, we can fight against this because the Howey test has now become subjective when it comes to digital assets because those 4 conditions are not clear, and that's a really big problem for the cryptocurrency space. We don't want there to be any kind of subjective decision making. We want clear classification over whether assets are securities or not, and whether they should be regulated by the SEC or not. Now, the cryptocurrency industry has fought against the SEC numerous times over this, trying to get more detailed explanation around the Howey test, better guidelines on how we can determine whether cryptocurrency assets are securities or not. And the SEC has outright said we do not need any more guidelines. The guidelines are already put in place, yet the SEC are losing in court over whether certain assets are securities or not. So the courts aren't even agreeing with the SEC when it comes to to determining whether assets are not by using the same test. Now, if the SEC is saying this test is clear, yet they're getting a different outcome to the courts, it's definitely not clear, and there are definitely some problems there when it comes to regulation of these assets in the US. It's abundantly clear that there's some problems there, and we need clearer guidelines, but the SEC have said over and over again they do not want to provide these guidelines, and it's created a huge mess in this space. Let's take a look at what's going on in the chat here. Good afternoon, James. Good afternoon, Jason Smith, the humbled one, and Nick. Thank you very much for tuning in, as always. I hope that all made sense. That was a bit of a rant about the regulation in the US here, but as I said, what we're having problems here when it comes to having clear guidelines in the US. Now, what's the problem with the SEC regulating these assets? Why is this such a big deal? Well, if an asset is deemed to be a security, it's regulated by the SEC. It needs to be licensed and kind of like declared by the SEC. So the SEC is there as a whole to protect investors. That's what it's for. Now, if you launch a security, you need to register it as a security. If you are a cryptocurrency exchange like Coinbase and Binance and you want to sell a security, you need to be registered as a securities exchange. So the SEC is saying, look, all of these assets that you people don't think are securities, all of these digital assets, they're actually securities. So the problem with the cryptocurrency space is we've got a load of unregistered securities and we've got massive companies basically being an unregulated securities exchange. So there's a huge problem here, and the fight back is, wait, these assets aren't securities. This is the dilemma we're having in this space here. A lot of people in cryptocurrency don't think these assets are securities, and the SEC are saying, yes, they are. How do we deal with this solution? Well, the easiest way would be the SEC to make some clearer guidelines, but they don't want to do that, so instead, we have been fighting in court. Now, I know a lot of you will be familiar with what's been happening with the Ripple case within the last couple of years. Ripple is one of the biggest cryptocurrency projects out there. They've been in a lawsuit with the SEC for a number of, I think it's actually past 2 years now. And this is because the SEC is saying, look, XRP, the token you are issuing, is a security. And Ripple and its CEOs are saying, no, it is not. It is not a security. So we've seen them have this battle in court for a very long time. And we actually did see a massive win for Ripple in the middle of last year when the court determined that in 3 of the 4 instances of which XRP is sold, it is not a security. So that was a massive win for Ripple, and it really showed some problems when it came to the SEC's framework and really brought on this kind of question around the SEC's credibility when it came to these guidelines. Look, if you can't agree with the courts, how are you meant to agree with the next person? These guidelines should not be subjective. You should not be able to come to one conclusion and somebody else come to another. It should be a simple set of instructions that clearly allow you to determine whether an asset is a security or not. If you are able to make a different decision to the person next to you, those guidelines are not sufficient. But the SEC are adamant that these guidelines are sufficient, so we are still seeing a problem. Jason Smith says the SEC has a purpose in the financial space, even if you don't agree with their opinion. Could you imagine how the industry would be if they didn't exist? Yes, the SEC has a purpose in the financial space. They are there to protect investors. That's the whole purpose of them. The problem I have with them is that they have not created clear guidelines for the cryptocurrency space, and we should have those clear guidelines in place. They refuse to create those clear guidelines. They say they're already in place, yet they're disagreeing with the outcome compared to the court. So if you can make a different decision from your own guidelines to the person next to you, your guidelines are not clear. And that is just a point blank. Jason Smith says, don't mean to play devil's advocate. No, it is completely true. The regulators are there for a reason. Regulators are there to protect us. But there are just some problems, and I believe the SEC are really stifling growth of cryptocurrency in the US right now. And this is a problem for the US. If the growth is still stifled there and they continue to push businesses offshore, US is the country that's going to fall behind in this race. There is going to be a first mover advantage. The more that a country adopts blockchain, adopts cryptocurrency technology first, the faster they do that, the more of an advantage they will have. If you continue to stifle growth in an area, you're going to try and play catch up continuously for the years to come. What we've seen in the US is a continued attempt to push companies offshore. Coinbase is a brilliant example of this. So Coinbase has CEO Brian Armstrong, and he has been working tirelessly over the last couple of years to try and get clear guidelines when it comes to regulation in the US. Now, he's tried to cooperate with the SEC as much as possible. He has tried to organize how he can determine whether Coinbase is listing securities or not. Basically, Coinbase have actually gone to the SEC before it became a public company and said, look, we want to know which assets we can list on our exchange and which ones we can't, because we don't want to be listing securities because we haven't registered as a securities exchange. So the SEC didn't really give much advice there. Instead, Coinbase said, okay, these are the rules we're going to play by. If a token meets these conditions, we're going to launch them. If it meets these conditions, we are not going to, over the fears that it could be a security, and we don't want to be labeled as an unregistered securities exchange. The SEC knew exactly how Coinbase were classifying their assets and deciding whether to list tokens. The SEC then allowed Coinbase to launch as a public company through the IPO. Following that decision, the SEC then charged Coinbase, accusing of being an unregistered securities exchange and of offering unregistered securities. Now, the problems here is that Coinbase has tried to cooperate with the SEC, reportedly, numerous times over the years, and the SEC has still charged them and created a lawsuit. So what does this do for cryptocurrency companies? It pushes them offshore, stifling growth in the industry and really causing a long-term problem for the US, in my opinion. So these are really the problems that we are seeing here. Now, we haven't even gotten to today's story. We've already got into a Jess rant. Alex says we love a Jess rant. Please, before we get into this article, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button so you don't miss the latest cryptocurrency news. Essentially, as I've just said, problems with regulation in the US. Coinbase has tried to work with the SEC continuously, and they have now been charged by the SEC. So let's take a look at this article, because we did see this conversation in court yesterday where Coinbase is seeking to dismiss the SEC's lawsuit. So Coinbase has been in court this Wednesday seeking to dismiss the allegations ruled against them by the SEC. Crypto exchange Coinbase and the US SEC are scheduled to participate in a court hearing to decide the course of action in the ongoing case. Now, the SEC has alleged that Coinbase violated federal securities laws in listing 13 tokens, including Solana, Cardano, Polygon, Matic, Filecoin, Sandbox, Axie Infinity, and you can see the rest down here. Basically listing all of these assets as securities. So what we can see here is legal expert Jeremy Hogan stated on Twitter that motions to dismiss are seldom granted. However, he noted that the district judge has a history of dismissing crypto cases, citing a past instance involving Uniswap. He went on to imply that the judge may move to dismiss the case based on her dismissal of the Uniswap case, her understanding of the technology, her finding that Ethereum is a commodity, and her acknowledgement that Congress should be involved in this process. So all that we've really got from the SEC to this date is that Bitcoin is not a security. That's the only real answer we've got off them. We have actually seen Gary Gensler name Ethereum as a commodity, then a security, then a commodity, then a security, and now he's just refusing to answer what classification Ethereum gets at this point. But we are still seeing conversations here of, can this case be dropped? Well, they were in court yesterday, so let's take a look at what happened in court yesterday. The real problem the SEC has here is the legal experts, we'll read through this article and get to the point here, but the real problem that the SEC are having here is the judges are saying, well, if you're labeling all of these things as securities, then what else is a security? So if you want to make a rule, the rule has to apply to everything. So let's take a look at this article and we'll explain that argument in a little bit more detail. So, legal experts have weighed in on the hearing between Coinbase and the SEC, with the latter taking flack for their arguments surrounding the definition of a security. During the Coinbase hearing on Wednesday, the US SEC could not articulate the difference between Beanie Babies and securities. Legal experts have suggested that this could work in Coinbase's favour. They are currently seeking to have a lawsuit from the SEC dismissed. The oral arguments for the dismissal are presented during a 5-hour hearing on the 17th of January. Legal experts have been chiming in with their opinions on the case throughout Twitter. So Jeremy Hogan, a partner at Hogan & Hogan law firm, stated that Judge Catherine made a noteworthy comment during the hearing, suggesting that the SEC's test to determine securities could potentially lead to a class action lawsuit against the seller of Beanie Babies. The SEC attempted to distinguish Beanie Babies from securities, but Hogan noted that it largely failed because, in the SEC's view, a Beanie Baby is considered a security. Another legal chief of crypto venture capital firm Variant had a similar view on the case. He commented on the hearing, "Today's Coinbase hearing revealed a key flaw in the SEC's legal theory. It turns nearly every asset on the planet into a security." And that is what I was just saying there. This is the major problem that the SEC faced in court yesterday, and this is a real shambles for the SEC. You can't just target these assets and say, yes, these are securities, and then kind of try and make rules around them and not look at the bigger picture. We need clear guidelines and rules, and that needs to be applied across the board. You can't just say, we want to label these digital assets as securities, so here we go. So there is possibility here that this is going to be thrown out. Let's take a look at this further, but before we do, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification button. That way you won't miss the latest cryptocurrency news. We do these live streams every single weekday. So let's continue on here and see what else is going on. So what we're saying here is this legal chief of crypto venture capital firm Variant has said that he believes that the judge appeared to share the perspective, describing the situation as the spectre of collectibles being regulated by the SEC. He further stated that this legal theory would give the SEC ruling over anything with a market price, such as sneakers, trading cards, or watches. Coinbase's legal chief echoed this sentiment in a post on Twitter, emphasizing the SEC's broad claim of authority over all investments without providing a limiting principle to its definition of an investment contract. The hearing was a hotbed of legal experts from within the crypto field. Pro-XRP lawyer John Deaton was sat behind Paul Grewal in the courtroom. He stated that he believed that Coinbase lawyers performed well against the SEC. So, what are the major questions here? Part of the hearing focused on arguments relating to major questions doctrine. So MQD is a relatively new legal principle relating to statutory imperpetration, and it is complicated by the fact there are at least two variations of the doctrine itself, the narrow version and the broad version. Under the former, doctrine says only that when an agency asserts that it has authority to decide major questions, courts should independently determine whether the agency's interpretation of its statutory authority is the most reasonable reading of the statute. Under the latter broad version, the doctrine goes further and says that courts must not interpret statutes as delegating major questions to agencies unless Congress clearly said so. So there's two differences here. Many litigants have tried to use this ruling to dismiss the SEC lawsuits brought against them. In the case of the SEC, subject to the interpretation applied, NQD could remove its jurisdiction over crypto, thus indirectly ending its case against Coinbase. So big changes here. I'm going to drop the article here into the chat today, the live chat today, because there's a lot of information there to be discussed. But essentially the problem here is that the SEC is basically labeling every single thing in the world that has a market price as a security, and the courts are saying you cannot do that, and this could end up in Coinbase's favor. Let's take a look at what else is going on here. So still on the same topic, judge in Coinbase case says the SEC's securities definition may be too broad. The judge nevertheless declines to rule on or dismiss the case today. So we haven't had an official outcome, but so far it looks like the court, it's going to sway in Coinbase's favor. So the judge questioned the SEC's arguments by saying, I am concerned that what you're asking for is too broaden the definition of what constitutes as a security. The SEC's assistant chief litigation counsel instead argued that the crypto tokens in question are part of a larger enterprise and are therefore akin to investment contracts. He added that the value of each token increases as the value of the network or ecosystem grows. By extension, each asset should be considered a security as the case develops. So, two big alternative arguments here. It all, once again, comes back to the how we test and how we determine whether assets are securities or not. We've been fighting this battle and we've had many rants on this show about the problems that we face when it comes to clear classification of these assets in the US. I think this is not a problem we are going to solve overnight. We are going to continue to see these problems for I don't know how much longer, but we are going to continue to see these problems. Hopefully it does get sorted sooner rather than later. Hopefully, if this case does get kicked out, we see the SEC be a little bit more proactive and create some more guidelines to help the cryptocurrency industry understand what is a security and what is not. And then we can all operate in the correct way. The SEC cannot just say the cryptocurrency industry is the Wild West, they're all doing illegal things, without giving us any guidelines to abide by. It's just not how it works. It's not fair for the industry, and it really paints the industry in a bad light. But thankfully, today and yesterday is not the day that we've been painted in a bad light. Instead, we have seen the SEC be painted in a bad light when they are potentially going to have that case thrown out. So it could be a big win for the cryptocurrency space there. Let's see what else is going on in the chat here. Jerome says they said there would be ETF Lambos. I know. Let's go back to the Bitcoin price quickly. We are finished on that story. We've got some more cryptocurrency news to discuss today. But we have seen a nice move to the upside this week, which was, last week, which was immediately rejected. That was at $49,000 last Thursday. It was rejected pretty harshly, to be honest. We were all expecting to see some nice movements to the upside. We were expecting the launch of a spot Bitcoin ETF to increase the price of Bitcoin significantly, but unfortunately that has not happened in the short term. However, these products launching in the markets is definitely something to still feel bullish about long term. If you look at the effect a gold ETF had on the value of gold, you can see there's a massive increase in the long term price, and we have the extra knowledge that Bitcoin has a maximum supply of 21 million. When the gold ETF launched and the price started to increase, the amount of mining started to increase as well, and people were finding bigger supplies of gold, so the supply was increasing. If you were to cap that supply and look at the value gold would have been had it had a maximum supply like Bitcoin does, the value would have been even higher. So these products are shown to be bullish for the underlying assets in the long term if you look at historical assets, but unfortunately in the short term we did not see that positive news that we wanted to see. But I am still bullish on this long term. We will discuss that a little bit more at the end of today's stream. I want to continue to push through and take a look at what else is going on in the cryptocurrency news today. So please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button so you don't miss the latest cryptocurrency news here. Next story of the day is what's going on with the IRS. So we did actually see somebody not so long ago transfer a huge sum of money into Satoshi's wallet. Now, we were questioning why somebody would choose to do this. Satoshi's wallet has been dormant since the very beginning. So why would you choose to send such a large amount of money to the wallet? Now, a lot of people were questioning whether this had anything to do with the IRS, whether this kind of put Satoshi in between a rock and a hard place. There are some rules in the US that suggested that the IRS needs to be notified if somebody receives more than $10,000 worth of cryptocurrency. And people were saying, look, maybe they're trying to push Satoshi Nakamoto to reveal their identity. I question that logic. I don't think that is going to be the thing that gets us all the knowledge of who Satoshi Nakamoto is. I don't think Satoshi's going to go, sorry guys, it's me. I need to tell you who I am because I need to tell the IRS that I've received some cryptocurrency. I just don't think that is what would happen. That would be the most shocking news ever. I think Satoshi's the kind of guy that wouldn't report it at this point in time. The account is dormant, but that was the question on the street. Is that why somebody sent that much Bitcoin? But anyway, it doesn't matter because the IRS has now said the controversial $10,000 reporting rule doesn't currently apply to cryptocurrency. So if they want it to apply for cryptocurrency, they need to make new regulations before the rules can apply beyond cash. So that theory's been blown out the window. We still don't know why someone chose to send so much money to the Satoshi wallet. Maybe just wanting to take them out of circulation, but why not burn the tokens? We're not really sure why somebody's chosen to do this, but it's an interesting story nevertheless. Let's see what's going on in the chat here. Jason says, I'm seeing an expanding forming wedge on the charts. What do you think? We will analyze the price of Bitcoin. In fact, let's take a look quickly. Let's go on the bigger time frames here. Let's remove these and see what's happening here. We have seen a slight breakdown if you are to take a look at what's been happening on the daily chart. All my lines are going to come back up now. Let's instead go on to BTC USDT Qcoin. Let's go on to here instead. If you take a look at what's going on the daily chart here, you can actually see that if you were to take this line across here, which has been used as a level of resistance, support, and now as a level of resistance, we could have already had that break to the downside confirmation bounce that we need to suggest we are going to go down to lower prices. In fact, if we continue to pull this out, how legitimate is this line? How far back does this go? Let's get this perfectly lined up. I think this is the maximum here, but you can see this has actually been used as a support before. So maybe this is a stronger line that we need to be paying more attention to, but I like to base mine very much off horizontal lines instead. I think that $41,230 level is a really strong level of support there, especially on the daily chart. You can see things a lot clearer here. There's clearly one at 44,242 as well, and they are around the levels which we were discussing earlier in today's stream. There are significant liquidation points right now. So we've got $43,700 and $41,800, very close to these levels. They're major liquidation points. So if the price of Bitcoin clicks those points at any point in time, a huge amount of traders will be liquidated. And we know Bitcoin takes the path of most pain, so it would make sense right now that maybe we are going to wick some of these levels. Let's take a look at what else is going on in the chat here. Jerome says, where's Craig right then? Who knows? Let's take a look at what's going on in the next piece of news today. So we've got JPM's Jamie Dimon believes Satoshi Nakamoto will either increase or erase Bitcoin supply. So let's take a look at this theory here. So the JP Morgan CEO's unfounded theories on Bitcoin have attracted massive backlash. Tell me you don't understand Bitcoin, mate. Do you know what? Things are so frustrating sometimes. Do your research or don't comment. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, took aim at Bitcoin once again during an interview with CNBC. So Dimon expresses an unusual theory in which he suggested that Bitcoin could be eliminated once its maximum supply is issued. I think there's a good chance that when we get to that 21 million Bitcoins, Satoshi Nakamoto is going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet, and all Bitcoin is going to be erased. Dimon also suggested that contrary to this, there is no guarantee that Bitcoin issuance will end once the circulating supply reaches 21 million Bitcoin. How the hell do you know that it's going to stop at 21 million? I've never met one person who told me that they know for a fact. One of Dimon's co-panelists, CNBC Squawk Box host Joe Kernan, noted that the last Bitcoin will not be mined until around the year 2140. Due to increasing mining difficulty, Kernan added that Bitcoin shares many economic properties with gold, to which Dimon replied, "You may be right, but I don't own gold either." Dimon's latest statements have attracted massive backlash on social media, both due to the general inaccuracy of his theories and due to the fact that he mispronounced the first half of Satoshi Nakamoto as Satoshi. So Bitcoin mining rules are unlikely to change here. We all know that the maximum supply, the 21 million maximum supply when it comes to Bitcoin, is hard-coded into the source code there. This is a piece of machinery, of software that you cannot change. Saying that you can just delete all Bitcoin is just such a naive perspective on what's going on in the markets here. Just because it's digital doesn't mean it can be erased. It's not information on a USB stick. It's a decentralized network. It's been hard-coded into the source code that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Yes, there's a possibility somewhere that we may be able to find flaws in the Bitcoin network. There's a lot of people worried about the quant computers and what they can do with the SHA-256 algorithm. There are a lot of concerns with the future of Bitcoin when it comes to their computational capabilities. But right now, with today's technology, there is no way to change the hard-coded information that's in the source code. There is no way to change that 21 million Bitcoin hard cap on the maximum supply there. So making these comments is just an ill-informed person trying to bash the industry and the asset as much as they can. Let's take a look at what else is going on in the chat here. Jerome says, is he convincing? Well, who knows at this point? People will probably listen to this and decide Bitcoin is something definitely to stay away from. We see things like this all of the time. That is such an ill-informed person with such a high status making comments like this. It makes people that don't know much about cryptocurrency very cautious of the industry once again. But I do believe, anyway, on a separate point, that these Bitcoin ETFs have created some legitimacy for the industry. So hopefully that does have some sort of positive impact there. Let's take a look at what's going on. We've got 22 likes on today's stream and we've got more viewers watching right now. So please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that bell notification button so you don't miss the latest cryptocurrency news. I've been on a couple of rants today, haven't I? Let's take a look at what else is going on here. Trump states he would end CBDC plans in the US if he was elected president. So let's take a look at this. In his recent campaign speech, he has stated, as your president, I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. Such a currency would give the federal government absolute control over your money. This would be a dangerous threat to freedom, and I will stop it from coming to America. We are also going to put in place strong protections to stop banks and regulators trying to debank you for your political beliefs. That will never happen while I am your president. So that's what's been happening over there. In 2021, Trump called Bitcoin a scam against the dollar and stated, I don't like it because it's another currency competing against the dollar. However, in the years after his comments, Trump has embraced Ethereum and released 3 NFT collections on the network. Trump's NFT collections are called the Trump Digital Trading Cards and has enabled him to generate millions of dollars in Ethereum from sales, therefore suggesting that Trump may be more favorable to fair cryptocurrency regulation in the US may be applicable. But what I think we're seeing here is a lot of the politics in the US, the politicians in the US are pushing cryptocurrency to try and get people on their side. Let's take a look at what else is going on here in the markets. Hello, Safe with Crypto. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, let's take a look at what's going on here. More ETF approvals to come, according to the Ripple CEO, Brad Garlinghouse. He has said that we are probably going to see not only spot Bitcoin ETFs, but maybe spot Ethereum ETFs. And we were discussing yesterday the potential of having leveraged ETFs and much more hitting the market. So big things to come here. Let's take a look at what he said. The reality is we have a Bitcoin ETF only because a US court said to the SEC, you're being arbitrary and capricious in your application of the law. What would be sad is if every ETF had to go through that same journey and for Gary Gensler to get smacked down by the US court system again, but that might be necessary. So he's saying, look, we are going to get these products launched. If you look at the rules, these products should be launched, but is it going to be a long old process like we've just seen for those spot Bitcoin ETFs? Potentially. When it came to the spot Bitcoin ETFs, they've been rejected numerous times over the years. We have Bitcoin futures ETFs in the markets. Grayscale tried to transfer their spot Bitcoin ETF into their Bitcoin trust into a spot Bitcoin ETF. The SEC said no. The SEC then went to court with Grayscale, and then when Grayscale won that lawsuit, the SEC were backed into a corner and they had to accept and launch these products. So maybe we'll have to go through that process again. Maybe the products will need to get rejected. They'll need to be in a lawsuit. They'll need to win the lawsuit. And then the products will go live. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but Brad Garlinghouse is preparing us for that. We know that he doesn't have a very good opinion of the SEC and the chairman, Gary Gensler, so it's clear to see why he might have these opinions. Let's take a look at what else is going on here. Final story of the day. SBF's parents filed motion to dismiss FTX lawsuits seeking to recover funds from them. So Bankman and Fried said the plaintiffs are capitalizing on their son being a founder and former executive of FTX. Now I'm going to drop the link to this in today's chat because I think we're all a little bit sick of hearing about Sam Bankman-Fried, but if you are interested, there's the article for you there. Let's take a look at what's going on the 4-hour chart here quickly. So as I've said, for Bitcoin, we are looking at some major levels of support and resistance. For Bitcoin, we're looking at around 41,000. In fact, let's pull up the clearer levels here. For Bitcoin, we're looking at around $41,000 to $40,000 as a level of support. For a level of resistance, we're looking at between $44,000 to $44,300 there. Now we do have another level of support at around $41,800. We'll see if we can bounce that nicely. Let's take a look at what's going on with Ethereum as well here. So Ethereum's had a little bit of a cool-off period. It did massively outperform Bitcoin in the days following the Bitcoin ETF products going live, off the anticipation that a spot Ethereum product may be coming very, very soon, and we may be able to front run those opportunities. But right now it is having a little bit of sideways action, cooling off and mirroring pretty much the percentage changes for Bitcoin. We're not seeing one particularly massively outperform the other right now. So just paying really close attention to that, because this indicates to me if an altcoin season is about to come around. And what we tend to see here is Ethereum will begin to really outperform Bitcoin when the bull market is in full swing. If we also take a look at Bitcoin dominance as well, if we pull this up, you can see that if we go to the weekly chart and we put onto this chart, Bitcoin halving, here we go. Bitcoin halving events, you can see that when a Bitcoin halving event occurs, Bitcoin's dominance falls off a cliff just a couple of months after. So what you can see here is we are expecting to see the next Bitcoin halving in April 2024. The 22nd is exactly the date that we are expecting it to happen right now. So what we could be seeing here is some fluctuations. This has started to kind of, let's get rid of that. That's not the tool that we want. The tool that we want is the brush. Here we go. So what you can see is this tends to, if we actually scroll backwards here, so you can't see any of this data, so you can see this a little bit more clearly. In the run up to a halving, the Bitcoin dominance starts to decline as Ethereum starts to perform well. And then following the Bitcoin halving, it falls off a cliff. And we saw that again here. It starts to decline, the Bitcoin dominance, as Ethereum starts to outperform Bitcoin. And then a couple of months later, it falls off a cliff. So this is something we can expect here. And when this happens, this is when altcoins are really booming. So right now, what we've seen is Bitcoin dominance has been increasing throughout the bear market. Yes, it started to come down slightly. So maybe this is an indication that Ethereum is going to continue to outperform Bitcoin as we get closer to that Bitcoin halving. And then eventually, a couple of months after, this is going to hopefully fall off a cliff, which is indicating altcoins are performing incredibly well in the markets, and we'll be getting those altcoin seasons where we see 100x gains for some of our altcoins and our assets, and some real nice profits there in the market. Let's take a look at what's going on in the chat here. Jason Smith says full throttle stream today, Jess. Yeah, very passionate about what's going on in cryptocurrency today, clearly. But that's all we really have for today's stream. So thank you very much for tuning in, as always. If you had enjoyed today's stream, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification button. We will be back here tomorrow with another cryptocurrency news update. So make sure